at the Global Investigative Journalism Conference, we asked some of the world's leading experts for their top tips when investigating stories. Techniques to investigate modern forms of slavery, its victims and those who profit, are essential skills.
Hi, my name is Marta Mendozа. I'm a reporter with the Associated Press. I do investigative journalism. I'd like to share some tips about how best to cover human trafficking in supply chain journalism. My first tip, and the most important thing I want anyone to know who's covering human trafficking, is that the victims of human trafficking have been greatly traumatized, and you have to be very sensitive in how you interview them and how you portray them in your reporting. These are people who have been exploited, and if you think about it, a journalist who wants to make a racy story might just be re-exploiting somebody, and it's never going to be okay. Really specifically, you want to have somebody who has perhaps a social worker or a close friend be the first one to approach and make sure that it's okay for them to even speak with the journalist. So to ask the permission, don't go directly to them. If you can have somebody who they trust and know already, make that request. When you interview them, let them take the lead on answering the questions. They may seem forgetful. There may be things they don't want to talk about, and you have to be okay with them not wanting to talk about things and letting it go. Interview people first without any cameras, and if they're comfortable with cameras, then move on and use cameras, but not until they give their permission. And at each step of the interview, make it their control. Is it okay? Would you be willing to answer this question? Are you comfortable talking about? So lead it in a way where they can back out easily. With children, you never show their pictures or their images. They don't have the maturity or the understanding to give a consent that they want their images used, and that could remain in the digital world for the rest of their lives. So if you interview children who are victims of human trafficking, don't use their images. You can go from eyes up, or just show their hands, or something else that's going to make it more clear that, that it is a child talking, but without giving away their identity. So the third point is about how to cover human trafficking. This is going to be finding victims and finding the sectors that they're working in. The way to go about this initially is probably work with relief organizations and shelters whose number one priority is to protect these people and help rehabilitate them. Get to know a number of shelters and relief groups and ask them if you can be introduced. And this is how you can learn about who's being victimized. Fourth, victims of human trafficking work for somebody. Somebody is making money off of their labor. And so when you're telling these stories, follow the money, find the receipts, find the bills of lading, follow it until you can hold somebody accountable for profiting off the labor, and follow it even further so that people who don't know that items they're purchasing perhaps came from a victim of human trafficking. And that's a way to have these stories make a much bigger impact. Fifth, I don't ever want someone to be surprised by something they read in a paper or see on television that I've reported about themselves. So give the people who are engaged at any level of this, including the people who perhaps are what we would call slavers, give them every opportunity to make an engaged and informed response to your reporting. Give them enough time and approach them in a way that they understand what it is that's going to be published, so that you can be truly fair in your journalism. My single most important tip for how to get into covering human trafficking is to work with and get to know relief organizations and shelters for victims of human trafficking. That's where you're going to find people who have been through this harrowing ordeal and can describe it for you, and also how you can learn about what sectors and what areas this is happening in, often being pointed directly to companies or manufacturers or other people who would be exploiting people in this way. I have learned a lot about how to cover human trafficking, and these 5 tips that I've come up with come from a particular project that it took more than a year to work on. For about 18 months working with colleagues, we covered a story that began with men who were enslaved on an island in Indonesia. They were literally being held in cages. These were fishermen who had been forced to live on boats at sea for between 1 to 22 years, not being paid, not seeing their families, in many cases being beaten. And what we did was we identified them, we interviewed them on this island, and then we followed their fish into port and through the supply chains all the way back to American restaurants and dining tables. The story took a very long time and a lot of effort to report, but in the end, 2,000 men are freed because of the work.